Hello and welcome to the Book Club Review. I'm Kate and this is the podcast about book clubs and the books that get people talking. It's always good to have things to look forward to in life, and the books we can see coming up on the horizon are no exception.
I don't know if I say this every year, but 2023 is such a good reading year.
Chrissy Ryan from Bookbar there, and in this episode we'll be finding out the books that she and her team are excited about. Whether it's new books from authors we here at the Book Club Review have loved in the past, or exciting new debuts from authors we've never heard of, we're primed and ready to get reading as soon as they drop. Plus, we have a nerdy dive into what it takes to run a small independent bookshop and why it's so important to be reading ahead of the pack. That's all coming up here on the Book Club Review. Not only is Bookbar one of my very favourite bookshops in London, it's also happily located just a short cycle ride away from my house. And so I packed up the recording kit and headed over for an in-person visit. A bustling bookshop with customers coming in and out and the coffee machine whirring away in the background isn't the best place for broadcast quality audio, but listeners, it does mean that you get to soak up a little of the bookshop ambience. I began at the top with Bookbar's owner Chrissy Ryan. Since setting up her shop in 2021, Bookbar has gone from strength to strength and is currently in contention for the Bookseller's Best Independent Bookshop Award. Access to proofs and advanced copies is one of the perks of the book-selling life, but just how important is it to be reading ahead?
It's hugely important. There are lots of cogs in the bookshop wheel. It's a very, very busy job, and it's a job that has very little routine, which can make reading hard because you're fitting it in. You're never reading on the shop floor. There is this romantic myth that booksellers are sitting devouring the latest proof on the shop floor. Absolutely not. There's far too much to do. And, thankfully we're far too busy. I'd be worried if we had time to sit and read on the shop floor. And you're running a business as well. So that typically leaves you with very little time. But it is the most important thing. You've got to be on the pulse. You've got to be able to say to a customer what's coming out. You've got to have an opinion as much as you can on something. You might not have read it, but you've got to know as much as you can about it. So there's the knowing and there's the reading, which are in some ways two different things. The knowing leads to the readings. The way that I try and read is I do try and read what I want to read, because that does often mean that I'm going to be able to recommend it well. But I'm thinking about what our customers might like to read, and I have relationships with different people in different publishing houses who really helpfully send copies of things or send an email saying, I think this is for you, what do you think, would you like a copy? Sometimes you'll get a really snazzy box of things and you know that someone's taken the time to give you that particular edition and an early proof, which means that you know that it probably is for you, because there'll be very few of them and they'll go to very few booksellers, so it has to be the right ones, and they'll have taken the time to think about that. It really is about relationships that we have as booksellers with people in publishing houses or authors that we've just built up over time through having the shop, through doing events, through working with them in the past. And then, of course, there's keeping your ear to the ground about things that people are talking about, other booksellers you trust, other authors, journalists, other people that are reading ahead as well. What are they saying? And just having a bit of a nose for what people are going to be excited about, which is one of the most exciting parts of the job. You can help to make a book be a success, which is really exciting. I remember we talked about Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus last year, and I remember saying, I think that's going to be really big. And it's been really big. It's really fun when you make a call about something, or you have an instinct on something, or something that you do as a bookseller helps to shape a campaign.
And literally in terms of ordering your stock, it seems to me it must be really important as well. How far ahead do you have to make those decisions about what to order?
It really depends on the publisher. I think I'm doing May and June at the moment, depending on where I'm at.
And we're now in beginning of February.
Yeah, and I'd say I probably work much closer to the dates than some booksellers do. I don't see the need to be so far ahead in terms of buying, unless there's a good reason.
All right, well, we mustn't get too nerdy, even though and I'm sure many of my listeners will find all that fascinating. Tell us about the books that are on your radar then. What are the things that you're excited about coming up?
I don't know if I say this every year, but 2023 is such a good reading year. I've been reading 2023 since probably last summer was when I was starting to get proofs and start reading. I think I read the Monica Heisey really good actually in like April, but that was a very, very early thing.
That's amazing, because I've just bought my brand new hardback copy of that, because I succumbed to all the hype and buzz. How amazing though that you read that so far in advance.
Yeah, well, again, it was one that it was like, this is going to be a big book, I think. So I got an early proof that was numbered 1 to 100 or something, signed. It was a very early proof, and I knew then, I thought, okay, well, they're doing some special things with this. Let's see how it lands. In terms of, what do I think of it? I thought I should prioritise reading this now, because if it becomes a big deal, then I want to be ahead of it. So that's what we did. But this year, 2023, feels like an extraordinarily good year, I would say, for reading.
Come on then, tell us some of your highlights.
Where do I begin? Honestly, I think I have a list of like 30 books that I could bring to the table now. I'm going to start with a book called Rosewater by Liv Little.
Okay.
It's coming out in April. It's a really classy romance novel set in London that's about a woman who is struggling with rent, and she's about to be evicted when you meet her, and she moves in with her best friend with whom she's had romantic feelings in the past. She is emerging as a talent in the poetry scene, and it's about this friendship really between these two women that could become something more. It's about family and art and poetry and love, and it's a really, really well told romance novel, which I just think is so exciting to see books like that being published. We've seen a kind of emergence of really well written romance fiction and rom-coms coming out in the last couple of years, from Emily Henry to Bolu Babalola to You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaeke Emeze. So there's been some really, really well-written, atmospheric romance writing that also has so much more depth to it than it may superficially seem. I'm really excited for that one.
Yeah, interesting. I think it's nice actually to hear about ones that perhaps people won't hear about, slightly out of the mainstream.
Yeah, and it's published by Dialogue Books, who have just become a division of Hachette. Sorry, this is a bit like boring publishing chat.
No, I think we love the publishing chat. This is why I come to you, Chrissy. We want the insider world.
So Dialogue was set up by Charmaine Lovegrove. Started 5 or 6 years ago. Charmaine is a huge champion for representation in the publishing industry, a much needed voice and activist within the industry, and she's done incredible things with Dialogue in terms of opening the conversation out and doing so much for inclusivity. There's still obviously a long way to go, but Charmaine's been a huge part of that, and Dialogue Books has been a massive part of that, and it's been so successful that it was recently made a division of Hachette, which is incredible, within 5 years. So I always keep an eye out to see what Dialogue are doing, because it's usually pretty good.
Interesting. All right, what else is on your post-it notes there?
Yes, I've got post-it notes. Small Worlds, which is the new novel from Caleb Azuma Nelson. Caleb wrote Open Water, which is this poetic, beautiful novel about a young black man in South London, and it's a love letter to South London and to black art and music, and every single paragraph feels like a still photograph. People talk about things being cinematic. This feels photographic. It's that kind of intricate and beautiful and detailed. It's a stunning novel. Every time I've read it, I've got more from it. So I was absolutely buzzing to read Caleb's next book. I've just started it, so I don't actually have loads to say yet, apart from it's absolutely beautiful. It's about a young man. You meet him over 3 summers. It's set between Ghana and London, and it's about this young man who loves to dance, and it seems that he's having a crisis of faith at the same time. I don't know where it's going yet, but I'm excited to get there. Just started it.
I have some sense now of, I suppose I read a lot more widely than I used to perhaps, and I have some sense now of the pleasure that you get when you have encountered an author whose voice you really love, and then you find out they've got another book coming.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think also we're so lucky as booksellers to meet lots of incredible authors, and then when they are absolutely wonderful and generous with their time, we've been so lucky to do events with Caleb, and he's become a friend of the shop, really. He'll pop in when he's in the neighbourhood. And when someone is that generous with who they are, you want to champion them even more when you feel like a sense of mutual respect and a sense of commitment and hard work. So yeah, Small Worlds so far, really enjoying and can't wait to read on. I only started it last night.
Do we know when that one comes out?
It's May. Yeah.
What's next?
There's a book called Wandering Souls by Cecil that's coming out in March. We're really lucky to be doing an event. Sadly, it's sold out at Bookbar. It's about a Vietnamese family after the Vietnam War who are trying to get from Vietnam to America. They are going as refugees and they go in 2 separate boats. The parents and the youngest children in one boat and the oldest 3 children in another. And the second boat with the parents and the young children never arrives. And you know that from the beginning, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. But then you follow these 3 teenagers trying to fulfill what their parents wanted for them, which was to get to America. They end up in Thatcher's Britain. It's this really brilliant story. It's a refugee story, and every refugee story is obviously different and heartbreaking in different ways. But what it does so cleverly is that it has this really clever way of making you question who's telling the story, and it unpicks really cleverly why we feel the need to tell these stories and who tells them and why those stories are told and who tells them. And I think it's done really cleverly. It feels really fresh and it feels extremely powerful in the way that it examines why and how we tell those stories and why and how we read them.
Sounds like a good book club book.
Yeah, it would be. And it's quite short as well. It's a 250, 300 pages. It's not long.
This has started to become my ideal.
Yeah, I love a short book. That's also a note for Caleb Azuma Nelson. Open Water is shorter than Small Worlds, but it still doesn't even creep up to 300 pages. I think it's around the 200 mark, Small Worlds.
Love that.
Yeah. And also, I think when a book's short, the books I've loved that are really short, every single word matters, if that makes sense. There's a richness to a short book.
You're doing the hard work here because I just get to sit here and say, what's next? You have to kind of do all the talking.
I won't go into masses of detail about all of them. I want to pull out another debut novelist, and then there's another book that I recently finished that I really liked. So I'm just going to briefly introduce you to 2 more. The first is Nicole Flattery's Nothing Special, which I think you'll really like, Kate. I think this is a bit of a you book. I think you might really enjoy it. Nicole Flattery wrote a short story collection called Show Them a Good Time, which was really well received. And this is her debut novel that's being published, I believe, by Bloomsbury in March. It's set in Andy Warhol's New York about a young woman who is probably 15 or 16 when you meet her, and she ends up getting picked up and becoming a secretary at Andy Warhol's factory. What's so clever about it is that you know that that's the setting. Andy Warhol is alluded to. He's a figure, but he's not a character. He's kind of this slightly off-camera figure who everyone references. And he's clearly in the room with them at different points. But I guess he has this power over the novel. And it's this incredible coming-of-age story. You don't know where it's going. It's about this woman who is typing up the transcripts of every conversation that Andy Warhol has. So he apparently, I had to go and look this up afterwards, he carried round a tape recorder and he saw it as art that he was going to then get every conversation he ever had transcribed. So she's immersing herself in Andy Warhol's life, and so you're getting it from her perspective, and then she's also seeing all this really quite unsettling stuff that's happening behind the scenes. It's really clever. It's a really good book. I didn't know where it was going, and I think it does it really well. Yeah, by the end, I was totally hooked, and, I just really believed the world, even though it's a slightly kind of... It eludes you in a way, because I don't think you're supposed to be in it. I think you're supposed to see it from her perspective, and she never feels in it.
That does sound hugely up my street. When's that one coming out?
March. Yeah. I think you'll really like it. Or at least I think it's one that you will enjoy dissecting.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. And then, of course, there is a book coming from Nisha Dolan, which I've just finished. That was my recent read this week, called The Happy Couple. So Nisha Dolan wrote Exciting Times, which was very popular. I think it came out in the first lockdown. It's a really witty book. This new novel, The Happy Couple, feels like a step up for me. I did enjoy Exciting Times. I thought it was really good. But this feels really witty and observant, and it's about a couple who are getting married. It's quite clear that they shouldn't be getting married, and you get her perspective, his perspective, the best man's perspective, the sister's perspective. So you get all these different perspectives, and the story evolves that way. It's really smart and funny, and I think will be a good hit, you know, one that I think people will really enjoy.
Sounds like another good one. Are there any quick titles that you want to just run by us?
On my reading list, Mrs. S is set in a fictional boarding school about a teacher who falls in love with their headmaster's wife. So it's kind of queer boarding school, sultry and quite dark is the feeling I'm getting. Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, who wrote Babel.
There'll be a lot of interest in this one.
Yeah, I think I haven't got a proof actually, so HarperCollins, if you're listening, please do send one my way. Yeah, it's a bit of a satire of the publishing industry, I think, and about internalised racism, misogyny and all sorts. I believe this is from the cover copy, I think. I'm looking forward to that one. Oh, how did I not talk about this? Emma Cline, The Guest. This was another writer that I really liked their first novel, The Girls. The Guest is going to be really exciting. It's a really dark novel about a woman who finds herself cast out by the man that she's staying with for the summer. He's an older man. She's in her early 20s. She's essentially using him to stay in a nice house for the summer and go to nice parties with him. And he tries to put her on a train back into New York, and she pretends to get on it and ends up spending the week sofa hopping around strangers' houses. She's very clever and manipulative and manages to fake knowing someone to get to a party to mean that she can stay there. And so she's going around this very small community and pretending she is someone that she isn't. It's really dark, and it reminded me a bit of Lisa Taddeo's Animal, which I know has mixed opinions, and I will say that I think if you liked Lisa Taddeo's Animal, you will really like it, and I think if you didn't like Lisa Taddeo's Animal, it's what you wanted it to be. If that makes sense.
Okay.
I really, really liked The Guest. I thought it was very clever and kind of dark, and it's had some bite.
Yeah, sometimes that's what you want. There's only so many romantic comedies, you know.
Yeah.
In a row that one can read.
Exactly.
Before you start, you really crave something. Something dark.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness, there's so much more. There's a book called Big Swiss coming by Jen Began, which is having a lot of buzz, and I'm sure we'll be doing lots with. There's a book called Fire Rush by Jacqueline Crooks, which sounds incredible. It's all about a sort of like rave scene in the 1980s. It's got this musical undertone, this beat throughout. I met Jacqueline Crooks, who came in to give us a proof, and she's so charismatic and brilliant. It's been loved by Bernardine Evaristo, and I feel like that's going to have some chat around it. So that's one to look forward to as well. A real London music rave novel, which is not necessarily something I know loads about because I'm not cool enough, but that sounds amazing. Yeah, sometimes it's great because then I'm the same, but through reading, I can access these worlds. I felt like I went clubbing with Caleb Azuna-Nelson. I'm ready for this. Yeah, exactly. I think, well, this is another one that Caleb has also shouted about, so I feel like it's got good endorsers. Can't go wrong with Bernard Evaristo and Caleb Zuma-Nelson as your champions, can you? Surely. No. Yeah. Oh, thanks so much for those. That's brilliant. I feel definitely you could go on, couldn't you? But I'm going to make you stop because Lucy is going to come down and give me a couple of her picks. Yay. And thank you so much for this rundown of your highlights. Pleasure. Sorry it took me about 45 minutes.
Chrissy's second in command is Lucy, who's just coming up to her first anniversary of working at Bookbar. To start, I asked her how much she prioritises reading ahead.
I really like reading ahead. I think there's a period of the year where I allow myself to read more backlist. That's kind of between October and December, you know, when you haven't got any new hardbacks coming out, but you know they're coming in January, so you can't completely stop. At the moment, it's all new release. And I really enjoy that because it means that we can talk to customers. You know, I think it would be really hard to work here and not be able to talk about things that are coming up. So yes, I do enjoy it.
Okay, what are some books then that are on your radar? What are some things that are coming up that you think people should know about?
This was really hard to narrow it down, but I've gone for the three that I think I most excited to talk about. The first one is Death of a Bookseller by Alice Slater. It's her debut fiction, her debut book, and it's out in April. This is set in a bookshop in Walthamstow. It's a made-up bookshop, but which feels, in parts probably to lots of people who work in publishing, kind of familiar. It's about two booksellers, one who is like the best ever bookseller you could possibly imagine, the kind of person who washes down all the shelves in every spare minute and has read everything under the sun and loves to find the perfect book for the perfect person, and one who is the absolute opposite and who is obsessed with true crime. And it's what happens when you're in quite a small bookshop and you end up working together and one develops a slight obsession, and it's really fun. It's nasty in a really fun way. It's dual perspective, so you get a chapter from Laura and then a chapter from Roach, and you alternate between. So it's really compelling, page-turning, just really fun crime book. That will be a really fun one to recommend, I think.
Okay, what else have you got on your list?
The next one, completely different, but another debut, is In Memoriam, which is by Alice Wynne, another Alice, and this is out in March. It opens in 1914, and you have these two best friends, and they're at school together, and they're both 18. And obviously, as we know, war is about to break out, and it does. They're still at school, they haven't turned 19 yet, but one of them is on a day trip, and a young woman comes and puts a white feather in his jacket. He is mortified and signs up immediately. I should say, you know right from the beginning that something else is going on. There's an undercurrent of something else. It's very much a book about love. And his friend joins to follow him. And so you've now got these two young boys, and they're both fighting in the war, and you follow them throughout it. It's really beautiful. It's really moving. It's a great book on love. You'd enjoy it if you like reading historical fiction, if you like reading about the war, but also if you like reading something about love and friendship and romantic love. It really stayed with me. I just thought it was fantastic.
And when is that one coming out?
So that is 9th of March.
And yeah, you've got the same problem that Chrissy had, in that I just get to sit here and just say, and what's next? And you actually have to talk and talk and talk. So I'm just giving you a little break. So on your little list, you've got 3 books.
I've got 3,
What's
yes.
number 3?
And number 3 is by Curtis Sittenfeld. She's the most fantastic writer, and she's written this book called Romantic Comedy. It's just a pleasure to read something that is so swoony and so romantic and funny and moving, from someone who's such a clever, incisive, observant writer. It's one that made me cry, laugh and swoon. And also the main character is 36 when you meet her, which I quite liked because that's my age. But it's nice to read a romance where the character's a little bit older. She's a comedy scriptwriter on a late night comedy show, thinly veiled to be similar to Saturday Night Live. A guest comes on the show. I don't want to give anything away, but it's great. It's just great, and it's very good summer read, I think.
I wasn't sure about that one because I have a slight hit-and-miss relationship with Curtis Sittenfeld's books. There are books she's written which I have loved, but I was not such a fan of Rodham. But then I heard someone talking about this one on a podcast, and it sounded so up my street that I have pre-ordered it. And I never pre-order anything. I've got way too much to read. But I was like, oh, that does sound good.
It is really good.
So I'm going to be really interested to see how that one turns out. And that's April, isn't it?
That is the 6th of April in hardback, yes. Again, that's one. I remember finishing it and talking to Chrissy and just saying, oh my God, it's so lovely reading something really swoony. I don't know if that's a word, but like it just, it was, really lovely, really lovely.
Great. Okay, looking forward to that one. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
A bookshop can have plenty of carefully chosen books, but arguably it's the booksellers who turn a good bookshop into a great one. And so I was happy to get to talk to a couple of the other members of Chrissy's team, Chandler, who's been at Bookbar nearly since it opened, and Frankie, the shop's newest employee who joined in the last couple of months. I began by asking Chandler how he gets on with balancing his advanced reading with the rest of his reading life.
I've got to say, I think reading ahead is probably one of the most exciting parts about being a bookseller. One of the benefits of selling books is being able to know what is coming out, what we expect to see in our shelves in a few months' time. I think with the balance between reading ahead and reading what's already out there, I find it quite easy. I like to mix. I read current books and what's coming out soon. And to be honest, what's coming out soon is usually what's most exciting, because you've got this first pick of what the new year might bring. and it's just really exciting to know what people will be reading. What is the future of reading, in a way?
The future of reading.
The future of reading.
Frankie, do you find that? Do you think that's what you're getting a glimpse into?
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. It is very exciting. This sounds really pretentious, but being ahead of the zeitgeist. I think as well, working in a bookshop, you get the proofs at the perfect time. I do a lot of freelance readers' reports for a friend who's a book scout. And when you get those manuscripts, they're 2 years in advance because it's when they're on submission to editors. So that can be really frustrating because you get really into a book and then you have no one to talk about it. For 2 years, you're sitting on it like, I want to discuss this book. Whereas with book selling, it's perfect. It's just before it comes out, so you're ahead of the curve. But then you also don't have this agonising wait to discuss.
Okay, well, let's hear then about some of your picks for the coming year ahead. Chandler, should we start with you? What's a book that's really caught your eye?
I've just finished reading One Small Voice by Santanu Bhattacharya, which I absolutely loved. It's so beautiful on family relationships, and it's such a wonderful story, all based in India. It was just very sentimental, it's very beautiful. His writing is something I've never experienced before, and it's a debut, so it's really exciting to see what he does next. I'm currently reading a book called Penance, which is the new book by Eliza Clark that comes out in July. She wrote a book previously called Boy Parts, which I absolutely adored. This new book is very exciting, very thrillery, funny, very contemporary in the way that it seems written by someone in their 20s. There's 2 books that I'm really excited about reading in the future that come out this year, which is Greek Lessons by Han Kang and also Deborah Levy's new book, August Blue. Both sound wonderfully kind of atmospheric in a way, all about relationships with yourself and relationships with others, which is my bag when it comes to books.
Yeah, I'm excited about those 2 as well, I have to say. Frankie, how about you? What are the books that are coming up that have caught your eye?
The ones that I've read, which I've absolutely loved, there's Collected Works by Lydia Sandgren. Lydia Sandgren's a Swedish author. It's her debut novel, so don't be misled by Collected Works. The title is very much tongue-in-cheek. She was huge in her native Sweden, and she's just been translated into English. Also, don't be put off by the size, because it comes out in March and it is 750 pages, I think. But honestly, it is, and I don't mean this in a patronising way because it's a really clever, it's an intelligent book, but it's an easy read because it's so gripping. You get so attached to the characters, it's so immersive. It's the story of this bourgeois intellectual family in Gothenburg who work in translation publishing. There's multiple timelines, and in the 90s, the mother walked out on the family, which obviously is like a very rare, controversial family dynamic. So it's a bit of a mystery as well, because in the present day storyline, the kids and the dad are always wondering what happened to this woman. It's about love, relationships, art. It's very much about gender balance with muse and creation, kind of like subverting a lot of those tropes and cliches that we've traditionally had in the Western canon. So that was one I've read and I'm really looking forward to. Another one that I've just finished is Thomas Nevinson by the Spanish writer Javier Marias, who sadly died last year. This is his final novel. Came out in Spain in 2020 and has just been translated into English. And it's another doorstop. I don't know why I keep choosing these massive novels, sorry. And it's kind of like a highbrow spy thriller. I love Javier Marias. He's a very tangential writer. He goes on these long digressions about history and art and culture. I think he was a genius, but also because this is a spy thriller, it's super gripping and pacey. 10 out of 10. The ones that I haven't read, which I cannot wait to get my hands on, The Late Americans by Brandon Taylor, who's an American writer. I read his short story collection, Filthy Animals, a year or 2 ago when it came out, and the clarity of his prose is stunning, and he really gets relationships and how people interact with each other. So I cannot wait for The Late Americans. And then the other one, which is also based on the back of me loving a short story, Irish writer Nicole Flattery, Nothing Special, which is about a young woman who ends up working at the factory, as in Andy Warhol's factory in New York in the 60s. And that just ticks so many boxes for me. 60s, New York, Andy Warhol, coming of age tale. And Nicole Flattery is a brilliant writer, so I cannot wait for that.
Well, that sums up Frankie's feelings and ours, with so many books we can't wait to read coming up on the horizon. As the days lengthen and winter turns to spring, it gives us more opportunity to grab those reading moments when we can. Keen listeners will notice the second endorsement for Nicole Flattery's book Nothing Special, which does sound like a good fit for us on the pod. If you've been listening to this and yearning to get in on the advanced reading game, you might want to look into NetGalley. If you're someone who likes to share thoughts about the books you read, whether that's through a blog, Instagram, or a BookTok account, you can sign up to NetGalley. You fill out your profile and let publishers know where your reviews will be seen and the kind of audience and reach you have. You then have access to a catalogue of advance copies from all the major publishers. If you see a book that interests you, you can request it, and it's up to the publisher whether they say yes or no. The way to get more yeses than nos is to make sure that you do follow up and post reviews of the titles, making sure you keep your end of the bargain. Just as a warning, NetGalley is somewhat of a rabbit hole where you can spend a lot of time scrolling through the thumbnails. Glancing through the other night, I spotted the new Eleanor Catton book, Burnham Wood, which is coming out very soon, and the advance buzz is building. Also, Greek Lessons by Han Kang, which Chandler mentioned. We were big fans of her book, The Vegetarian, which we did for our second ever episode of the pod, and which made for an amazing book club read. There's a new book from Emily Henry called Happy Place. That's coming out at the end of April. The blurb says, 2 exes, 1 pact. Could this holiday change everything? Harriet and Wynne are the perfect couple. They go together like bread and butter, gin and tonic, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. Every year for the past decade, they have run away from their lives to drink far too much wine and soak up the sea air with their favourite people in the world. Except this year, they are lying through their teeth. Harriet and Wynne broke up 6 months ago, and they still haven't told anyone. But this is the last time they'll all be together here. The cottage is for sale, and since they can't bear to break their best friends' hearts, they'll fake it for 1 more week. How can you pretend to be in love and get away with it in front of the people who know you best? That has me thinking about summer reading already. And so, if all this future reading has whetted your appetite, there is the possibility that you could be doing it too. Or you could always start a books podcast. If Laura and I can do it, anyone can. That's nearly it for this episode. You'll find all the books mentioned today listed in the show notes or at the episode page on our website, thebookclubreview.co.uk. This episode of the Book Club Review was produced and edited by me, Kate Slotover. For more about Bookbar, check out their website, bookbaruk.com, or if you find yourself in London, go and visit them in person. It's well worth the trip. If you enjoyed this show, don't miss our website, where you can find our archive of over 100 episodes to browse through. From our Booker Prize or Women's Prize specials to regular book club chats and interviews with authors and other book industry folk. You can also sign up to our bi-weekly-ish newsletter and find out the details for our Patreon account and how to support us there. If you'd like to see what we're up to between episodes, follow us on Instagram at Book Club Review Podcast, on Twitter at Book Club RVW Pod, or get in touch with us via email at thebookclubreview@gmail.com. We always love to hear from you. If you like the episode and want to help us out, please take a moment to leave us a rating and review through your podcast app of choice. This really helps new listeners to discover our show. But for now, thanks for listening and happy book clubbing.